Thank you very much, and we shall now invite you to take part in a session that looks towards the future. And this session, it pertains to an effective ecosystem for the development of e-health, digital health. We will hear from Aviad Tamir, Head of Life Sciences and Healthcare Invest in Israel. Then Robert Modach, the co-creator of Institute of Health and Democracy, Marek Konarzewski, the advisor for Science and Technology at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, this session is somewhat different. It is less about a particular technology or a case. It is a session focusing on the system as such, on the way economy works, and on the place of e-health in our overall economic life. Does e-health contribute to wealth? Does it bring added value? So that's what we want to achieve. We want to build value. We want to create wealth. We want to build global cooperation, global competition. And is it possible? We have invited Aviad Tamir from Israel to tell us about their example. Israel is a country that's somewhat smaller than Poland, but it has already achieved major success. So we want to discuss how we can take the opportunity of digital development in order to increase our role in the global economy. So this is the topic of the upcoming session, and let us now invite our panelists to tell us about the future. Our first keynote speaker is Aviad Tamir.
Dzień dobry, everyone. Happy to be here in this forum. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Aviad Tamir, Head of Life Science and Healthcare at Invest in Israel, which is Israel's investment promotion agency. I'm going to talk a bit about Israel, the healthcare ecosystem, and the story of our healthcare ecosystem, basically how we build it. So just let's start with a bit macro data. So we can see, the size of Israel is 22,000 square kilometer. It's basically, I think, 7% of the size of Poland. You can see the number. I think the unemployment rate is not really reflect now the number, because of the COVID. It's hard to really to understand, but I think Israel got elastic economy, and once the COVID will over, this is going to be pretty much the number. So when we talk about Israel, and first of all, it's about the culture, about the people, about the innovation, people that taking the risk, that looking for a solution all the time, trying to execute. And this is the number, we're number one startup per capita, number one growth of innovative companies, and basically every rank of index of innovation, we are in the top 6. So we talked about the culture, but the culture, it's connected to people. I think we invest a lot in our human capital, in their engineering skills, in their computer skills, in their research skills. You can see Israel number one in the world, in at least top in the world in terms of data science skills, which is a major factor in all this digital transformation. And academics, also very important things that the government would emphasize. We have top academic institutions, the Technion, which probably several of you heard about, Tel Aviv University, Beersheba, Jerusalem. In terms of R&D expenditure per capita, we are number 2 in the world, and also in terms of the research of the talent. But I think a major factor of building the ecosystem is the involvement of the multinationals. A functioning, thriving, good ecosystem is an ecosystem that comprised with a lot of multinationals. So we can see Israel has over 400 multinationals R&D centers in Israel. Obviously, the biggest one are softwares, but we have also in medical devices, in cyber, in the industry. And if you can look in the bottom box, you can see some of the big brands in the healthcare active in Israel. Roche, Philips, Teva, obviously Israeli company, Merck, Tronic, Scientific, all of them have R&D centers, and some of them also have manufacturing. We believe that the added value that Israel can give is the connection between proximity between the R&D to the advanced manufacturing. And these slides, it's an interesting slide because I wanted to show that I think where the world is going today is going towards the digital transformation. It's area when we can see that all the verticals, all the sectors collide. We can see collaboration between life science and automotive, life science and cyber. And you see today, you drive in the future, a car, you're gonna drive in a car, and Alexa gonna ask you, how are you? And you're gonna feel that you're a bit stressed, and you're already gonna call your psychologist and take you there. So I think when we look also at automotive, so Israel, it's not known as a country of automotive industry, until I think 5-10 years ago, when 90% of the value of the car was the shield, Israel was not part of the game. But now 90%, or at least a major part of the cost of the car, of the brain of the car, is the software. So Israel is playing a major role in the automotive world industry. So we can see companies like Mobileye and Waze and others, and we're not manufacturing any car, but still we are in the forefront of the industry. Just a bit about the healthcare and life science ecosystem. So, we have over, I think, around 1,600 companies. A third of them is biopharma, other third is the medical devices, and digital health is the rest. And digital health, taking a bigger and bigger part in this. Digital imaging, drug delivery. If you heard robotics, probably you heard about Mazor Robotics that was acquired 2 years ago by Medtronic in $1.6 billion. And so we talked about the ecosystem. So what is the ecosystem? The ecosystem is the combination, I think, of the multinationals, the combination of the culture, the academy, the hospitals, the startups in the industry, and I think also a very important factor is the government support. We as a government, we're trying to create a platform that will push and leverage the resource of the ecosystem, and I will elaborate later. So when we're looking at the Israel ecosystem, is it a coincidence or a secret sauce? How do you create an ecosystem, or an ecosystem evolve by itself? So let me dive in a bit about the digital health. But first of all, let's start about Israel in general. When you look at Israel, and over 400 multinationals and 7,000 startups and everything, but at the bottom when you start, you see like our limitation: we're a small local market, we're an island economy, and limited natural resources. And I think when you look all this advantage, this is what pushes us to be more innovative. So we are a small local market. So we say, okay, we need high connectivity. We're an island economy, meaning we cannot produce for ourselves. It's not enough. A company here cannot build on the Israeli, cannot survive on the Israeli market. So we always need to be a global-facing economy. Every startup, every company that starts in Israel, they're always looking about taking it to Europe, taking it to the US, taking it to the East. So they're always thinking about, even when they start just doing the POC, they're already thinking about going abroad. And of course, we talked about the culture, about the limited natural resource, so also investing in the research, in the academy, and in the people. And as a government, we believe that to be in the balance between looking at the bottom-up trends, meaning looking at our infrastructure, looking at our value proposition, our island of excellence, and connect it with the top trends, top global trends, and trying to create this platform that create the balance and the collaboration. And here is, I think, more concrete example about how we did it in digital health. So from the left top side, we can see, the local strength. We understood that we have a strong medical data infrastructure. In Israel, 99% of the people have EMR, electronic medical records, for 20 years. We have a strong biotech industry. We have a great medical staff, and we have also we identify a lot of talents, people that coming from the high tech, coming from the army, people with expertise in software, in physics, in data scientists. So we understood that we have a strength. From the other side, we saw the global challenges. We saw that in future, we see there is aging population, starting this today, the rise in healthcare cost. We can see that more and more in the future, the cost of the development going to be higher and higher, and it's going to be based on AI. So AI is going to take a major factor in the cost of the development, and also the need for more preventive medicine. When we look at these two, we said, okay, what do we want? We want, first of all, to increase access to affordable and quality healthcare for our citizens. The budget is always short. It's like a blanket. You cover your face and then you see your feet. You cover the feet, you see your face. So the budget is it's relatively not enough, and you have the challenges. So we need to be more precise, more personalized, more affordable. And digital health is digital health solution is the ability. It's the tool that will provide us this ability. So we said, okay, as a government, what can we do? Let us build a program that will help to harness all of it. Will support the infrastructure that will promote innovation, that will help to adopt digital solutions. So what we did, basically, we started with close to $275 million investment for 5 years, starting 2018. And we said, okay, we need to invest in the data infrastructure. We created a project called Mosaic, which allow creating 1,000 database of 1,000 volunteers that providing their blood sample for DNA sequencing. We invested in creating a better data source. We created also in mechanism, in investing in innovation hubs. When we talked about the collaboration between the multinationals, academia, and healthcare, but how do you do it? So the platform is, one of them is Innovation Hub. We create a hub that the government bring a tender for companies, could be financial institutions with multinationals, to run these incubators and collaborate with startups. Other programs, it's a program that the government supports collaboration between the academy and the industry. So we're trying really to be the glue that connect all of them together. And this is basically, as I mentioned, the big program that the government did. So we basically, we put all this money, and still putting this money, harnessed all the talent of the people, the healthcare system, the academy, the global companies. And it's interesting also in a sense, when we're talking about the healthcare system, we wanted to do it better. Now, how do you make the healthcare system better? So created a program that will incentivize the HMOs in the hospitals to adapt new technologies. We gave them money. We fund them to create pilots with startups. So startups could come and look at the challenges of the HMOs. They will pilot together, create a POC. The government will fund it, and later on, the best solution will be adopted at the healthcare institution. And I think I talked before in the beginning about the digital transformations, and basically the collaboration between the verticals and sectors. And this is, I think, also another important aspects when we look at these examples from provide added value for multinationals. From the other end, from the left side, we see the open innovation platform. We see platform like incubators like MindUp, which is digital health incubators with IBM, Medtronic, and Pitango. We have Sanar Ventures, which is incubators that comprise with Teva and Philips. And we see ARC, it's incubator that Sheba Hospital run it, one of the top 10 hospitals in the world. So we try to create open innovation platforms. From the other end, from the right side, we can see also Israel is a place for the sandbox, the place for companies can come and can collaborate with other companies, can look for solutions. So we can see Roche and G Healthcare collaborate in Israel, opened a center for over 50 data scientists to create a solution, digital solutions for acute care. We can see also Medtronic and IBM collaborate on drug delivery system. So Israel is basically the place that the companies coming today to look solutions for tomorrow questions. And so when I'm thinking about what we did here, I think we try to harness our abilities, our infrastructure, our added value, and also attract the multinationals and like see their challenges, help them to identify the challenges and a solution. So this is basically just a bit about Israel. And thank you very much. As I said, I'm from Invest in Israel. Happy to be in touch. You can reach me through LinkedIn, through email, phone. And if you have any interest in investing in Israel or creating collaboration, happy to be here, at POC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aviat, for your excellent introduction to our discussion. The case of Israel was great. You coped very well with the challenge, and you have tapped into the opportunity. We have certain aspirations. We are identifying goals. But how to execute on them, how to realize our dreams in the era of Industry 4.0 or perhaps 5.0. Digital economy has pivotal role to play. Turning this question to our panelists. Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I would like to greet Marcin Harańczuk, who cannot be with us because he's a practitioner and he's on duty in COVID wards. So unfortunately, he has to get his hands dirty tonight. He can't join us. So we greet him because he was one of the co-funders of this panel. And, he provides me with inspiration because of what he does in terms of Polish-American collaboration. But I'm sure we can go on with our discussion, keeping that in mind. The first question is to Robert Moldach. Because, developing on Aviat's message, I wanted to ask you, what determines success? What drives success? Israel is a small country with big aspirations. Poland has aspirations too. We are slightly bigger. We have very talented people. We have inventors among us. We have specific resources in Poland. And in recent decades, we had major resources because EU was pumping money to Poland to stimulate innovation, and it was up to us how to allocate this money. So, Robert, could you share your brief reflection? What do you see as the success factor? Well, thank you very much for inviting me to join this discussion. It's a fascinating topic, to be honest. Why some communities succeed while others fail despite massive effort. When we are talking about success, we need to ask ourselves, what is success? What determines success? And what is the measure of success? It's a very difficult task to define success. It's a change of status quo, change that is enabled by innovation, by new methods of working. When we look back on Polish achievements in health, well, we have to keep in mind that, for example, promotion of teleconsultations is a success. But is it our success? No. We have harnessed a technology that is 150 years old. So it wasn't innovation in the strict sense because, we were using phone, the same way Bell and Edison did. But it's also our achievement because we have changed status quo using existing century-old technology. So the change of status quo, which is very visible and is very well reflected by the ecosystem that we've created, well, to make it happen, we need three elements that interplay. And we saw it, in the presentation. Well, first of all, you need an environment. You need people who are generating new ideas, new concepts, new solutions. And Poland is a country which definitely, because this is confirmed by analysis, studies, and surveys, we have very well-educated people. We have excellent working teams. We have the academia, meeting very high standards. So we have people able to create new solutions, set new values, and innovate. But what the Israeli model has two other elements, and we need to look at them closely. Legitimization of these initiatives. There was a slide which pinpointed the role of the regulator and the environment it created. So, in other words, legitimization, what I mean by that is saying, yes, this is important. This is how we want to create certain conditions for widespread application, or we can earmark public money to create favorable condition for this solution to work. During the previous panel, Roman Topor-Mądry said that legitimization may be reflected by clearly identifying what we expect and how we want to proceed. So, in other words, the state should take the responsibility and identify what we want to achieve and how. So, legitimization is definitely an element of culture, of Israeli culture, where you have mastered it to perfection. Very often, unfortunately, in Poland, if I can afford self-criticism, very often we fear changes. We fear change as the state, as the regulator, and as users. But it's a separate topic. And there is a third element that comes into play. Well, people who will implement the change at the end of the day, who will take the ultimate accountability, who will deliver solutions and benefit from them. And again, looking at healthcare in Poland, not electronic prescription, but teleconsultation, there was not much enthusiasm surrounding it. Even today, people ask, is it working how it should be? But nevertheless, there was an impulse. It was a legitimization, but, the impulse was provided by COVID pandemic that triggered a certain process. And regardless of fears, regardless of our state of unpreparedness, we had to go ahead with the new solution, which became popular. And we've managed to overcome resistance. There is always resistance. There is always reluctance. There are users, and there is another group, much bigger, of people who are reluctant, who are later paying the cost. Well, the cost is taxes, or another cost may be certain solutions may be more challenging for them. This is the case with all the patients, all the physicians who are not really on good terms with e-health. And there is also the third group, technology enthusiasts who are tech savvy. So to sum up, the Israeli example clearly shows that those three perspectives, the perspective of people who are creating the new value, who are introducing new solutions or new applications, the perspective of the legislator or business centers or capital, entities that provide organizational and financial support, and the perspective of stakeholders who rationalize the solution, who demonstrate to us that it makes sense. So those three elements need to interplay for us to say that new solutions are valuable and they gain momentum. And this has been, working very well in Israel. And I think Israel, is admired by everyone. There was a mention about the culture of innovations. But the culture of innovation, it requires openness. It requires the willingness of the regulator to take on accountability for
parties which will later implement those solutions in real life. So we have a long way to go before we can say that we have an ecosystem which is friendly to innovation, because I'm certain that creators of innovations, of new values, of new solutions are there in Poland, and they know how to change the status quo. Robert, thank you very much for your comment. Now, question to Mr. Sierpiński. Well, the agency was founded as an element of state infrastructure. It's an element of the entire ecosystem. We don't know if it's there, but we've embarked on its construction. For another time, we have realized that we need to build it, so an agency was appointed, and its goals and mission, because it has a mission, perhaps it's meant to become the creator of the new system. So I want you to comment on Polish aspirations. How do we perceive different elements of this ecosystem, and how do we want to proceed with building it? Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. Congratulations to our Israeli colleague on his very exciting presentation. I've recently visited Israel, and it was a very interesting tour. This ecosystem is the key, is the buzzword. We need to establish it in Poland for all those magical solutions to happen. And I was talking to Robert Moda, and we agree. We have all the ingredients. We have all success factors. We have R&D infrastructure. We have very well-educated IT engineers. Funding, very often mentioned. Well, funding is ample. What is missing is to connect the dots, connect it into a whole, and implement solutions that would optimize the healthcare system. I don't think it's coincidence that data is the new currency, and this motto, will help us build the healthcare system fit for the modern age. It must be digital. We notice many changes in this area, and this is, by the way, reflected by decisions of the European Commission. For example, the white paper on digitization of the healthcare was recently published. Those solutions are also implemented in Poland. And what is missing in our discussion is one very important stakeholders. The e-health center, which is the creator of systemic solutions and which is accountable for their implementations, electronic prescription, electronic sick leave and referral. These were bang-on decisions in the times of pandemic. You can imagine what would happen if those solutions were not in place, if you had to go to your physician and write paper prescriptions, which have to be approved by a number of authorities if the drug is reimbursed. So as you can see, how big a facilitation has been introduced by these solutions, and Poles patients and medical professionals alike are ready and open to these solutions. Recently, I've prescribed an e-prescription for my mother. My mother was astonished that I wrote it down, and she told me, "Why didn't you text it to me?" So as you can see, even between the elderly, the approval rate is very high. The Medical Research Agency is one of those institutions that should be promoting innovations in Poland, and next year there will be a competition for clinical trials or application of AI in Polish oncology. We were looking at different IBM solutions, which is implementing in the US decision-making solutions in oncology, in pathomorphology, in radiology. AI is basically replacing doctors, and we have to follow suit. I think we have to go even more digital in Poland. There is potential. We have the money. We have the will. What is important is inviting private stakeholders or the private business to join our discussion recently. I know that Prime Minister was talking to AstraZeneca. I know that a biotechnology hub will be established in Poland, and probably in the nearest future will be collaborating with with big pharma companies to go even more digital in healthcare. And I see massive interest on behalf of business. They want to see solutions put in place that will boost the efficiency of healthcare. So there is interest on the part of government. What is missing is discussion with e-zdrowie, e-health center, which is implementing solutions in real life. But a lot's been done, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Well, we have many talented people who are setting up new projects. So we have also done quite a lot in terms of infrastructure. You have mentioned the achievements of the e-health center, which helped us so much during the COVID crisis. Could we have done more? Well, it's always an open question, but sometimes it's also good to appreciate what we already have and what we already achieved. So the question that would refer to Poland as it functions globally. Yes, talented Polish teams can receive support in order to be competitive on the global market. It's very important. What Arvid said in his presentation is how valuable it is to make sure that there is support for the ecosystem from the state, so that the small startups, because all startups are small at the beginning, could become part of the process that ends up on the global market, so they can be present on other markets. Yes, indeed. We have enormous potential in Poland. We cooperate with partners from the academia, with startups, and there is a great drive for new solutions, for new innovative solutions. But in Poland, people feel that we have the science. What we lack is implementation, that sometimes things that our researchers come up with are never implemented. We have ideas for artificial intelligence, data mining, and so on and so forth, but what we miss is implementing them into the system. So the advantage the United States or Israel have is that the solutions prepared at universities or at startups or at R&D centers are then translated into implementation throughout the system. So we have great minds. They publish the results of the studies. They make patent applications, but in other countries, they would be implemented much quicker than in Poland. So we had a concerning trend because many technologies that were devised in Poland were purchased by multinationals and implemented on other markets, not on the Polish market. So we had to buy our products prepared by our scientists, our engineers, and we had to buy them from the multinationals at a very high price because we were not willing to create an environment to implement these solutions here. And we want to make sure that these solutions are implemented here and serve Polish patients. Well, thank you very much. And I would like to ask Mr. Marek Konarzewski. I have a question and also a request to hear about your experience in building international connections. You are involved in many transatlantic projects. You are very familiar with this very innovative and very competitive market, in particular, as it is the biggest healthcare market in the world. So where do you see opportunities for Poland, for Polish companies to build such international relations and connections? Because without such connections, global success would never be possible. So where should we start? Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It is a great pleasure for me to take part in it. And it was also a pleasure for me to see Mr. Sierpiński, not in person, I'm sorry to say, but at least online. So let me start with Israel before I move to the US. The presentation we have heard about the Israeli ecosystem was very interesting, and I would like to thank Avid for this presentation. This is an excellent example indeed, and let me remind you that the Israeli ecosystem would never be possible without it being developed over a long period of time. It is a very mature system that we are dealing with. So it took dozens of years to develop, and we'd like to be there already, but we need some time. We are on the good path. And an important aspect that Avid did not mention, when I started working on international cooperation a dozen of years ago or so, I noticed the very important role of funds in Israel. BELT, for example, this is a bilateral fund that supports R&D using money invested by the United States and the government of Israel. And this shortened the path between ideas and their implementation because it provided funding. This fund is still in operation. Over the years, over $1 billion was invested by this fund. So that's really a very, very important amount. And so this is something that is still missing in the Polish system. The path in Israel is much shorter. We have to work on it in Poland because only then ideas will be translated into solutions that are implemented, just as it happens in Israel. And going back to your question, well, the models from elsewhere, and the United States in particular, but also from Israel, from Western Europe, can be transferred into Poland. But as we already know, and Mr. Mulder has mentioned it, it is not as simple as moving one solution and implementing it in another country. We still need to build our own ecosystem. It is already happening, President Sierpiński was very modest, and let me just tell you that during the last 2-3 years, his agency is maybe the most important element of institutional ecosystem. So this agency and the Łukasiewicz network, as well as the National Agency for Academic Exchange, made it possible for us to make our academics more mobile. I want to encourage all of you to visit this website because there are many programs that have to do with health, with MedicNava, for example. I have the pleasure of being part of the board of this program, so I know what is happening there, and it is well worth your interest. So we need to, we have the money in Poland. Our institutional setup is becoming more and more mature. So we do not really have to envy Burdel from Israel. We already have funds in Poland that are available. So what we still need is some patience and certain shift in mentality. Mr. Mulder said that COVID struck us very much, but it resulted in a change in mentality. We are no longer afraid of electronic prescriptions, as Mr. Sierpiński said. So in the near future, this will also change our way of thinking. So certain ideas that we tried to present to the decision makers in Poland in the past. We had some ideas from the United States presented by Alliance for Innovation. I'm sorry, Marcin is not here with us, but all these ideas will now be much better received by the decision makers. So we need a vehicle to identify these ideas, and there the role of our diplomatic service is very important, and maybe we are not using this mechanism as much as we should. because the stakeholders, the business stakeholders, could be using the resources and the intellectual capital and the capital, human capital of our diplomatic services in the United States, in Japan, and in other countries, in Israel, and so forth. That's one thing. And apart from that, we certainly should maintain the activity level of organizations such as Affini. We have a very good Polish presence in Silicon Valley, in the United States. So we should tap more into this source of human capital, contacts, ideas. And apart from the fact that there are many opportunities that we miss too many opportunities compared to countries such as Israel. But the work that we have already done, the funds that we have already invested in building this ecosystem of uploading the knowledge, translating it into products that are then launched on the market. This work has already been done. So we have to improve the system. We have to make it more effective. We have to make it more mature. And how to do this? Well, there is no simple answer, and I certainly don't have one. But, well, this is why we have conferences such as the one we're taking part in. Young people are an important factor. If we make it easier for them to find a way through the system with the help of the right institutions, we are deemed to succeed. But we need time. And let me just go back to the example of Israel. It did not happen overnight. It took time. Israel created this excellent ecosystem over decades. So we need time. We need to go through all this, and there is no shortcuts. Well, thank you very much, Marek. Thank you for your observations. And yes, there are so many opportunities that you've missed, and we do not measure this. We think, oh, opportunities will always be there. Well, I would like to ask you a question. Would you be so kind as to comment? A lot has been said about international cooperation.
Brief suggestion or brief thoughts about what are the challenges of international cooperation, how to build this international cooperation, which is so crucial for having the success.
Thank you. Happy to comment. Thank you to Marek, to Robert, to Mr. Sierpiński. Thank you for the comment. Just relate for several of the things that you said. Extremely interesting. I think first of all, Robert, you talked about why certain countries succeed, why others not. I think at least in case in Israel, maybe other country, maybe like you can look at even on Estonia or Finland, which digital health is implemented heavily. I think it's about that sometimes when you're small and you don't have a market, so you understand that you need to work harder. You need to, in order to export your services, in order to do a POC abroad, you've got to be more innovative. So we don't have a market, so we at least need to be more agile, more flexible. And it's also, I think, influence on a collaboration. Israeli companies understand it today if they need to go to the market in Europe, or in the US, North America, or in Asia, they got to find a local partner. So they always look at a local partner. It could be like hospitals to do a POC. And this is, I think, the heart of the collaboration. I think also later, Mr. Sierpiński, I think you talked about a bit about the health, that it's not, telehealth, it's not yet integrated in Poland. And maybe there was the doctors were a bit hesitant, or the consumers. I think I see it from both two ways. First of all, it's about market education. I can say it even myself. I'm working in digital health, and I had like a TytoCare, which is a telehealth device, and I still took my son to the doctor. And then the COVID arrived, and then I said, okay, we're stuck. Let's use telehealth. And after I used it, first time, and I was walking in this, I said, hey, why would I go again to the doctor? Now, instead waiting in line, instead taking an appointment, instead risking my silent infection, I can log into the system, and in an hour, I can talk with someone. So obviously, it doesn't enough for every indication, but I think it's about also the consumers. But from the other end, the government or the HMOs, local authorities, they need to create the infrastructure. They need to incentivize, create infrastructure of telehealth, of data, connecting this, even incentivize the doctors. I think that even doctors today in Israel, they understand that they sometimes they work in the morning in their clinic, and then afternoon they have like 2 hours free, and they log into the system, and they see like 10 patients. It's like Uber. You are available now. Let's take you for 5 rides. So even doctors understand that they can be more efficient and get more time with the patient. And last thing, I think we talked a bit about global infrastructure for a global collaboration. And I think you mentioned about the US and Israel, the dual fund, the bilateral fund. Yes, so Israel has a bilateral fund with the US, which it's not big in terms of the impact on digital health, but we have a bilateral fund with a lot of countries, and we have also with the EU, we have Horizon. And I think there is a lot of room for Israel and Poland, and definitely Poland to use more of the EU funds to work on a collaboration in digital health, in research. I think the Polish people, I spent a few years ago 4 months in Poland, and my family came from Poland. So, I think that Polish people are very, very smart, very educated, speak great English, very entrepreneurs. There is a lot of entrepreneurs, in the spirit even. I feel like there is a lot of resemblance sometimes between people in Poland to Israel in the, taking risk. And maybe, we need to find, or your government need to find more ways to create the platform and the funding. Sometimes you need the funding to create a platform for collaboration. You cannot just expect it's going to happen. You need even maybe it's the local authorities in Warsaw, other cities, create a hub and create a grant for collaboration. So for instance, when one of the programs that we did in Israel, it's called the pilot program. I think I talked about it in the presentation. It allows startups to work with a healthcare organization and create a POC. And so the government pay for the POC for the pilot, and if it's good, the HMOs, the healthcare organization, they implemented it. But if we wouldn't give them money for this, so they wouldn't do it. They would deal with their daily task of working hard to getting patients. So sometimes you need to fund the innovation. It's really important to create this collaboration. It doesn't happen, and it's also important, also not just about money, creating a lot of meetups, a lot of meetings, gathering, create community between physicians to entrepreneurs to multinationals. And I think I'll be happy to be more involved and collaborate with people in Poland and assist with what we can, offer, be the bridge between, and obviously with the trade mission in Warsaw, economic trade mission led by Sarah Ann. She's a great POC. You can always approach her and work together. And, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Aviat, for your comments and your inspiration thoughts. Szanowni Panowie,
Okay, and final notes and comments. Well, perhaps the claim that health is going global, just like other sectors, is true. Well, big pharma is truly international, but digital health, perhaps it's another very real and promising dimension of health. So the question to my Polish colleagues, can it become the priority of our development strategy? Can it become one of key directions or axes of the Polish development strategy? I don't know if you would like to confront this question right now, or perhaps, okay, let's try. 1 minute for all of you. Well, there's no point in discussing it. Well, data, information. Well, we've said it many times today. Data is the new currency. Data become a value in its own right, and we have to learn how to use it on the global scene. But in the case of health, this is not an easy task, as you know very well, because always there is ethics, transparency of usage, market competition that comes into play, finding solutions with reference to data. So it's a common Polish and pan-European, because we are an EU state, pan-European challenge, how to make the most of data available. And I would like to make another comment, because we've said it very clearly today. Well, we comprehend it very well, but we need to be very vocal about it. We need to change our culture, how we capitalize on innovations, no matter how we positively talk about Poles, our country, the young generation, their intellectual potential. We, as a country, I mean, so it seems to me, we are a bit prudent when it comes to change, when it comes to changing the status quo. And embracing innovation and being open to innovations, it requires intensive work. You need to shape and create the culture of innovations, and you certainly don't do it overnight. It takes years, but you need to demonstrate some initiative. You need to promote it, the culture of innovations. I think it's one of the key conclusions. It's not enough because we have everything, all the prerequisites, and one may ask, if we have everything we need to have this ecosystem in place, why is it not happening? You know, despite the fact that I ultimately support everything that is innovative, I disagree with the firm statement that in terms of support and legitimization, we have everything we need. But it's true that we have most of the required elements, but, you know, we don't have the essential one. It's not popular enough. We are not open enough. We are not ready to absorb innovative solutions. Because as it always is with innovations, with changing the status quo, there are heavy users and light users. And today, absence of solutions. We are not anticipating that there will be always people who will be skeptical. So thinking about innovations, we have to factor in, we have to keep in mind that together with innovations, we need to draft and address issues, potential issues, to keep skeptics at bay. Because very often we fall into a trap. Well, thank you very much. I do apologize. You know, many topics to be discussed, but time is running out and we have very packed agenda. So Marek, a very brief comment. Well, it is an opportunity for Poland. There is no going back. The digital market is becoming digital. I don't want to dwell on it any further. I'm not going to touch on biobanks, etc. But I think this will force us to accept and adopt new treatment methods. So I see globalization as an opportunity, not a threat, and I think we should make the most of it. And your conference is showing very clearly that at least main players in Poland have identified this opportunity. The only question is, will we be able to effectively implement it? Okay, thank you very much. This is a very optimistic note, and you know, a word of summary from Radosław. recent years, and this is beyond any doubt, we have made a quantum leap in digitalization in healthcare. So achievements such as introduction of e-prescription, e-referral, I think this proves that, innovation is possible. Together with Professor Konarzewski and the Polish ambassador to the US, Mr. Wilczek, we were wondering what can become our Polish specialty, and we've concluded that it's e-health and biotechnology solution. I hope they will become our specialty one day. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your final words, because there are many people who share your view, and hopefully let's wish it becomes a reality. So thank you very much.